Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. How you doing, Josh?
Excellent, Dan.
And our final show of the year, we're going to return on January 23rd, but tonight, another very interesting family story tonight. We welcome to the program Kevin and Hans Thind. Guys, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Now, you guys are with CI Analytics, and Josh, it's a very specialized business, and I'm fascinated to learn more about it.
You know, it's a business that certainly there's not a lot of competition out there. It is very specialized. It's highly technical. And the business behind that is even more interesting. These two young gentlemen, brothers, you know, kind of take us through their story and how they have had to deal with the pitfalls and the loss of a father and a mentor. So let's get right into it. And I'll turn to Kevin and Hans and say, maybe for the listener, just tell us a little bit about what CI Analytics does today, and then we'll take it back, dial it back to where it started.
Well, basically, we manufacture analyzers to detect hazardous gases and hydrocarbon streams. Our primary customer base are petrochemical companies such as Chevron, BASF, and companies like that.
And where did CI Analytics begin? How did it get started?
It started, I'd say, around 1988. My father started this company more as a consulting company. He worked with various companies, actually our competitors at the time, from there it went to consulting for most of the 90s, and then in 2000 he actually gave me a call when I was at work one day and told me he had an opportunity to buy back our laboratory and process analyzers. These are instruments that he made for other companies, and he had an opportunity to buy it back, so he did.
Have you been in this business for a long time? Like only when he bought it back? Like how did your dad kind of train you? Where was your origins in this business?
You know, when you start your own family business, when you go on your own, that venture, it's a family adventure. If you're in it or you're not, it doesn't matter. You're there 24/7. Hans and I actually grew up in the business from day one. So if you're, I think we've been there our whole lives. So.
And was it difficult to work with Dad? I mean, sometimes fathers and sons and daughters certainly have different types of styles. You know, what was the style of your dad? Was it very different from your own, and how did you work that through?
Well, he was very controlling. It wasn't easy to work with him sometimes. I can remember as a kid, I never really had weekends. Those were always at work. He'd always tell me, you know, if you can finish your work before a certain time, then you can go and play with your friends. Unfortunately, he'd give me so much work that I would never be able to get out. But he was definitely very controlling, but for a good reason. And everything that he said to me, I can see that.
Did you guys know from a young age that you would eventually go into the family business, or did you explore other things growing up, other pursuits?
Well, Dan, to be honest, growing having a father who was very tough on you, you obviously try to think of other ways out, or I guess you can say look at different possibilities in your lifetime for the future. In my case, I opted to continue school, and he was a strong advocate. He was a good advocate for school. So basically, he supported me there. And I actually went all the way and was doing my MBA when he passed away. So just to give you an idea, he was always there for us. Yeah, he was, in a way, very involved in your life, but in a good and constructive manner. Whereas maybe some others might consider it a bit too encroaching, so to speak.
How did you? Yeah, I don't know if Hans, did you have this similar experience?
Well, me on the other hand, I was more of a hands-on kind of a guy. I actually enjoyed doing work with my dad. I made a decision in I think it was 2002. I actually stopped school to go and work full-time with my father to learn all the the ups and downs of the business, and basically understand how the business is run. That being said, with the clients, and basically how to service the analyzers, and it's more than I bargained for. It's not an easy thing to do.
Now, how would you describe your style today? as you run your business, as you deal with your the team or the people, how would you describe it, and how different is it from your dad's?
My father was more autocratic in the sense that he was a micromanager, and that's okay to certain types of styles of managing. I didn't really agree to it. I guess I was more up to date with the current practices, if you will. So it was becoming more out of the norm the way his approach was to managing, and I would always stress that to him. And on numerous occasions, he would tell me that when I'm in his shoes, I'll understand. And to a certain degree, I can say that you have to find a fine balance between the micromanager and the type of manager that will allow you to work on your own.
It's really a tough line, actually.
We've been discovering it's very, very difficult to find, I guess we can say, competent people that can actually work on their own. So it's been a very challenging HR experience.
So do you find yourselves kind of wanting to, make your own paces and make your own style, have that stand out, yet you kind of have your dad in the background going, well, maybe he was right on certain things, and then mix between the two?
All the time.
Yeah.
There's not a day that goes by that I'm not questioning his style to my style. I'm a bit more relaxed than he was, but now, with I guess you could say about almost 6 years experience now, I can see why he was the way he was, in the sense that I used to think that you can just easily delegate work, whereas it's not the case. You can't just, tell somebody to do something and it'll happen, because when he used to ask me to do something, I used to do it with 100% and make sure that everything was good for him when, you're working. But when you have an actual somebody working for you, and you think you can't just delegate, because sometimes, you maybe not be understood.
If I can expand on that, it's just pretty much the fact that when you're working with people, they don't always have the same mindset as you in terms of, we grew up, I guess you could say it was a very focused mindset where we knew what we were doing on the weekend nights, and with that attitude, when I went out and got a job elsewhere, I gave 110. I didn't mind going in the weekends, nights, no problem. I was there, and it was just for the benefit of the company. I don't get that same philosophy when I hire people today.
Coming up, more with the Thin brothers, Kevin and Hans, on today's Entrepreneur, and dealing with the sudden loss of their father as well, and how they coped, finding themselves running a very complicated, very specialized business. So that's on the way. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guests on today's Entrepreneur tonight, Kevin and Hans Thind, a brother duo from CI Analytics. And guys, we're talking about your business, your story. Now, essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have a system that detects impurities at oil refineries. So before gas gets to the pumps, you guys sort of have to take out all the junk that gets in there. Tell us how exactly that works, without getting too technical, obviously, because it seems like a very complex business.
Well, basically, our analyzers, we analyze the impurities in the, like you said, the gas. Just to give an example, would be sulfur in diesel. Basically, when you go to the gas pump and you see that this gas is certified to contain 15 ppm or less of sulfur, that's basically our analyzers that are backing it up and basically giving the certificates to the refineries saying that this fuel actually contains that amount of sulfur or less.
If I can give an example, just to visualize what we're talking about here, our analyzers can detect parts per billion. What does that mean? 1 parts per billion. Pretty much 1 second in 31.7 years. Just visualize that, and that's how low we can go in terms of a detection limit.
So if those impurities get in, what kind of effect does it have on your car, for example?
Well, your car won't work. But
That's not necessarily the car won't work. That you're making people scared, but basically it's more at the refining process. Basically, these refineries, they have big processes going, as you know. Basically, just to give an example, not to go too technical, as you said, a lot of refineries have catalysts to process all this fuel, and if there's too many impurities, it'll actually damage and break all these catalysts, which would cost the refineries anywhere from $1 million to $2 million per shot.
Now, there's some very technical parts of the business. There's also running a business. What are the roles that each of you play, and how did you get into those roles?
All right. Pretty much Hans is the hands-on fella who meets customers and has a social camaraderie with them. I'm more in the back in the office, so to speak, and managing the company.
Was that something that came easily, and then how did it evolve from when your dad was there? If he was controlling, when you came to the business, was there a difference or a change in roles? Did he allow a little bit? How did you find your groove and stay in there?
Well, I was always helping my father with the numbers, so to speak, from a very young age. So that just was a natural process for me to go into that area. So Hans was more of the hands-on, and he would work with my father the late nights and everything to make sure that we had the products ready for the next day delivery, so to speak.
So Hans, you're technical and sales.
I'm technical, sales, and friend. Basically, my clients have grown to love me in the sense that they only want to deal with me because I give a level of service that they don't get anywhere else, and that's what distinguishes us from a lot of other companies. And that role had been given to me by my father, but just because he recognized that I was capable of entertaining and also being very genuine and ethical in my practices.
In your approach. And just to say that he got off the flight, off a plane just before this meeting. He was in Texas at a wedding, a customer's wedding. So, I mean, you have to get close there.
and Dan, and in family businesses, when you have siblings that come in, and certainly fathers and pass down to their sons and daughters, to establish the right role, to make sure that people are running smoothly in what they know is not always easy. So when it comes naturally, the business is certainly better off, and those that kind of have to work at it, it does take a lot of effort, and it does take a lot of soul searching and eye opening, because either dad or the siblings really have to know that this is what I got to do to make the business run right, and these are the roles that we have to play.
We'll take a quick break and more with Kevin and Hans Thin on Today's Entrepreneur, CJD. 7:25, welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Our guests this evening, Kevin and Hans Thin from CI Analytics. And I'll do my best to try to recap what their business is. They take gunk out of fuel, basically.
We analyze the gunk.
They analyze the gunk. They make the equipment that analyzes the gunk that's in the petrochemical that ultimately gets refined into a multitude of products.
Exactly.
There you go. Good job.
That's much better, Josh, than I. Thanks very much for that.
Accounting, give that up for this.
Yeah.
Now, in the petrochemical business, your business is worldwide. It fluctuates constantly, as we all know. There must be tons of complications. Tell us a bit about how it is in this business, doing it worldwide, dealing with different countries, and dealing with a fluctuating market.
Well, let Hans talk about his experiences overseas with Qatar, for example.
Okay. Well, this is not much really about fluctuations. I would say it's more about problems traveling. Basically, I travel, and I'm a Canadian, and I know how it is in Canada. But having traveled so much, it basically opened up my eyes to how different cultures work, and basically I've learned a lot by traveling, and I realized that not everything is the way it is at home. For instance, I can remember when I went to Qatar once. It's a very beautiful country, really nice people, but I wasn't accustomed to their way of working, which basically, if you come in there on a work visa, and for instance, I was there for about 6 days, and I completed my work, and my supervisor, when I was finished working on the analyzer, he didn't sign a paper for me because he forgot. Basically, I was at the airport, and they weren't letting me leave, so I was basically stuck there. I didn't know what I was going to do, and finally I managed getting in contact with the refinery, and they came and cleared everything up for me. But there's many people who are not aware of these kind of things, and you can get into some trouble. It's not so easy sometimes.
It sounds like there's definitely some challenging countries to deal with. Are there any countries that you've dealt with that are maybe a little easier from a business front, from a movement of goods and that kind of?
Oh, it would have to be South Africa.
Would be easier, less challenging than?
Yes, because very cooperative people. I've gone there about 5-6 times, and every time I've gone there, very helpful people. They help to the process. They prepare in advance for your arrival. They're just very, very prepared people, and very pleasant experience.
Now you're dealing internationally, so naturally you're dealing with the U.S. dollar. How have you dealt with the fluctuations over the years?
Right. We can go back to 2002. Can we call it an exchange rate of approximately 1.57? I think even went a bit higher than that. And today we're fighting with par. So yeah, there are challenges. A couple of years ago, I can mess up almost 60% of the time, and I'll still be making some type of money. Today, it's you have to be very careful how you manage the exchange rate, and basically prepare for anticipate the what's going on in the overall economy here and abroad.
Do you deal with foreign exchange contracts?
I choose not to, although there's a lot of people that have approached me for it. You have to understand that as a small business, cash flow is a main consideration. And when you get into these contracts, you're obligated to pay it, whether it's in your favor or not, based on a nominal value. And that can be dangerous if you don't have the cash at that time when that contract expires. So that there is a risk involved by not taking it, but there's also a risk involved by taking it. So I opted not to. That allows me to manage my cash flow better.
And it's certainly, listen, you're going in with your eyes wide open. Entrepreneurs have to do that every day. It's not, well, great, there's a bank that's offering this what looks like to be really good on paper, this great deal, potentially save your rear end and protect the bottom out. But you know what? There's a lot of ifs, and you have to understand these contracts really well. The fact that you have that MBA and that bit of that finance background certainly helps to a great degree.
Definitely.
More with Kevin and Hans Thin from CI Analytics on Today's Entrepreneur. But first, back to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guests this evening, a brother duo, Kevin and Hans Thin from CI Analytics. Josh, we're talking about their business, which is in the petrochemical industry. Obviously, when they're in that industry, things are fluctuating all the time. They're doing business abroad. The world markets are a factor. The price of fuel, I'm sure, is a factor as well, of crude. So many things at play here.
And we were talking about the change in the dollar, the fluctuation of the dollar with their international market. And I understand, from Kevin, it's like, okay, we don't play the foreign exchange contract, but then how do you battle it? Do you work with your pricing of your products?
Right. Pretty much. Our pricing has gone up significantly to counter the high dollar. And depending on the market, we're fortunate to be in a business that we can pretty much price the analyzer to where we see fit. Obviously, I have to take competitors in consideration and see what they're doing and all that, which I do. But basically, we were underpricing to get into the market many years ago, and now I just brought us back to parity in terms of pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, I've been able to focus more on growing the business, getting a stronger foundation going, and mitigate that risk of the dollar.
And is there competition that you have to keep tabs on, or do you end up being relatively unique in the marketplace?
There's different technologies out there. Without getting too technical, there are different technologies available out there. They don't necessarily go as low as us in terms of parts per billion, but they can take some business away from us. So we need to pay attention to that and focus on marketing as just like any other company. So
now it's very technical. I know we've been staying away from the technical, but as soon as you hear technical and you hear petrochemical and you're a manufacturer of machinery, I can't help but think that there's some research and development that's going on. And as an accountant, of course, I think of tax credits. So have you been able to take advantage of those? And did you recognize that early on? How did you deal with the R&D side of the business?
Right. Well, yes, our business is almost 100%, a lot of R&D involved. So we do have outside consultants helping us get our R&D tax credits. There is too much jargon in there and too technical in terms of how they want it written and how they want it presented, and it may lead it to get it denied, and then there's legitimate work involved, in terms of of our research and development. So it was almost a no-brainer. We hired an outside consultant to help us, and they're doing a very good job. And we work together throughout the year to make sure that we're well represented and make sure we can get our R&D tax credits.
Is this something that dates back to even prior to your dad passing away?
No, this is something that we brought in. This is, I guess you could say, my father's philosophy was there's no time for those kind of things, if you will.
Government money. There's no time for government money.
No, but the idea is that we're too busy working here to focus on these loose things. Let's go after the bigger,
Bigger contracts.
Get customers on our side, work with them, then focus on the R&D aspect of it. Even though we were doing it, I am aware that we were losing it, but you have to choose which battles you want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And for my father, the R&D tax battle was one that was too small for him to consider to go after.
Now let's, I guess, jump to the part of the story that I guess is might not be easy for you to talk about, but I'm sure that the entrepreneurs listening would gain a lot of information. Tell us a little bit about the time leading up to your dad's passing and how there was either some planning or not enough planning.
Josh, there was no planning. I mean, like in the sense of there was no will, there was nothing of that nature. We talked a lot at lunches because that's what my father would do. He would coach us. He would tell us what to do in the event of.
But nothing in writing.
Nothing in writing.
On a napkin sketch, if you consider that to be writing.
But that's not. I mean, that's talking in a legal sense. That's not legitimate. So no, nothing really in writing. Just verbal and napkin sketch that would be tossed out with the meal. No. So I knowing that, and knowing the battles that were going to be coming our way if we didn't get that sorted out in a timely fashion. I mean, it's not like I look in a crystal ball and say, "Oh, you're going to die on this day, therefore."
Mm-hmm.
No, but it happened that close. If we look at the lifespan of his life, we got it done in December of the previous year, and he passed away in August.
This is his will that
His will.
He didn't have a will written up.
He had something, but nothing of the nature of to address his business or just no. He didn't have anything that I would consider legitimate.
He had enough to confuse everybody.
There you go.
Is this something that, Kevin, you took upon yourself to force to happen? Is this something you worked
It
with
came
your
to a
siblings
point. It came to a point where I told him, "I'm going to pay for it because I know who has left with the headache." And he said it was overblown, and I was. But when he saw me, when we went to the meetings with the lawyers and everything, he recognized the importance, and he actually pat me on the back and says, "It's a good move," because he saw it at that moment. But if that moment never came, then.
So now, what happened in the weeks building up to his passing, and where was the roles of the two of you, of the brothers in the business? What was certainly everything was normal, everything was going smoothly. What happened in the weeks before?
Well, pretty much, I need to make it clear. I wasn't really officially with the company. I was there as a family member, helping my father. So, for me, I wanted to make it clear to him that I wasn't coming in,
and that you were not going to continue in the
business. I was not coming into the company, and we actually made a timeline for me to leave, and it was January of 2007. So that was literally 2 weeks prior to his passing.
Wow.
So at that moment, Hans was clear that he was in the company, and my father's basically told us that whoever's in the company, pretty much has it. So it was clear that it was going to be going in Hans's hands.
I also devoted all my time to it. So
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Now he passed very suddenly. I'm sure a very tough time for your family. How did you sort of put yourself on autopilot and decided you had to be there for the company, or was there some reflection there, or you just sort of went with it?
It was a pure impulse for me. Basically, I just closed my eyes and said, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, I didn't deal with his passing until maybe 3 years after the fact. That's when the dust settled for me.
So, and in my case, it was more like I was still, I figured I'm going to help my brother out and help him with the management, but I was not really planning on coming back to the company. I was pursuing an MBA in investment management, and that's what I wanted to do. But regardless, I wouldn't let a family business fall to, become nothing. And I wanted my brother to have a good foundation as well.
Now, you have other siblings, correct?
That's right.
How did you how did you deal with that? Was there anything specific in the will? How did you manage with the other siblings?
I mentioned that my father always coached us and talked to us at lunch, but he did that with all of us. So there was a very good camaraderie between all four of us, and we could get along. and that's purely my father coaching us, throughout our teenage years, talking to us about how when we get older we're going to have our wives and husbands, and
Basically, life is gonna happen.
there you go. Life is going to happen. Go with the blows, and this is So we were able to get along, and Hans and I we decided. He actually approached me, told me that he wanted me in there to help out, to actually come in. So I officially came in 2007 as the chief executive officer, and at that point we worked out everything with our siblings to ensure that there would be no
No angry birds.
no angry birds. Yeah, right. No angry birds.
Was it an amicable discussion? I mean, did you have to determine a value for the company?
Well, yeah. It's very simple. There's two ways of approaching a business, and I'm sure you're well aware. It's a liquidating value or a going concern. In this instance, if my father was not there, he left us with a lot of liabilities, and we had to. There was too many open orders. So this was completely unexpected. We weren't anticipating his passing, and there was too many liabilities, and we're talking a lot of money here. So taking that all the things in consideration, we opted to look at it as a liquidating value, simply because if we did not go for it, they had a choice to go for it, and if they did not want it, then there was nothing there.
And so you're saying it was a very simple conversation with them because they
it
didn't
was
want to go?
in every conversation there's going to be emotions. There's going to be a heated discussion, some people yelling, some people crying. That's fine. That's life. It's emotions. You have to focus.
Yeah, the emotions take over.
They do, but I guess you can laugh, but I'm amongst the siblings. I have a cold approach to things. I try to take the emotion and put them aside, and look what's real there and be fair.
And Hans, I mean, I know you mentioned that you dealt with this a few years after the fact, but in the moment, did you have comments? Were you contributing, or you really just weren't sure at that time?
Literally, my father passed away, and I just honestly, like you said, I went in autopilot. I was getting married 2 weeks after the fact that he died, and I just turned that switch off and went for it. I didn't think of what I'm doing. I just went through the movements. I pretended like nothing happened, and in my head, he was on vacation.
I sent him to South Africa, Thailand, and some other place in one trip just shortly after his passing. And
right. I had my first son born in February. I was just in time for his birth, and then I left for 3 weeks. I came back, and he was already, too big for my hand. I was traveling a lot.
Do you have a shareholders agreement today? Have you learned from that, and have you created the paperwork so that you don't have to run through that same issue again?
Yeah, this is where I tap my hand. We actually approached a notary to get that done, but we're actually going to be working with our lawyers to get this was roughly a year ago, but there's no follow-up on it, so we're definitely going to get that taken care of for sure.
So I take it your advice for other entrepreneurs out there who have family businesses, have that morbid conversation and be prepared in case tragedy strikes?
A lot of people don't want to talk about it. It's a real fact of life. I'm sorry to break it to you. And the fact that we actually talked about it during lunches and stuff, I was prepared. I knew what to do when it happened.
And it's something that all entrepreneurs, it's difficult to deal with because you don't want to deal with the death of a close family member. But if you don't talk about it, if you don't plan it, if you don't put it in writing for those that are not involved in the business, wow, it could be absolutely disastrous. So that's a very good, hard lesson to learn, but a good lesson to learn.
We'll come back in a second. We'll bring in Mike Newton from Fuller now to talk more about family businesses and making that transition, and also making that transition when it's very quick and very rapid, and when it's a shock to family members. So we'll discuss that next. It's 7:45. CJD l'équipe au traffic now. Here's Michel Boyer.
Thanks very much, Dan. Well, actually looking at a really great drive on most of your highways in or around town this evening. Taking a look at the Met, you have a bit of volume on Metropolitan westbound between the 215s. Nothing that is going to cause you very much time. Just getting a clarification from Transport Quebec just moments ago that the Ville-Marie eastbound will be closed between the mountain entrance and the mountain exit, I should say, and the entrance from the Bonaventure. That as of 11 tonight until 5 a.m. tomorrow. Also, the ramp from the 20 eastbound over to the Ville-Marie East, that is a big one. That will be closed at 9:30, expected to reopen tomorrow, or 9:30 to reopen tomorrow morning at 5. If you do spot anything, accidents, delays, I'd love to hear from you at star 800. That's a free call thanks to Bell Mobility. No problem on your West Island routes along the 20 or 40. 120 channels of commercial-free music, news, talk, sports, and comedy. Get service at half price when you activate any Sirius radio. Details at sirius.ca. Montreal's most trusted traffic and transit every 15 minutes, only on CJAD 800.
Personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
$7:48. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Our guests this evening, Kevin and Hans Thind from CI Analytics. And we also bring into the conversation Mike Newton from Fuller Landau. Mike, how are you?
Pretty good, Dan. How are you?
Good, good. And so, Mike, we're talking about transitions with family businesses. What happens if you have a planned slow transition? And in the case of Kevin and Hans, what happens if you have a very rapid and shocking transition?
And you know, it's really difficult for entrepreneurs, and planning is huge, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. So perhaps you have some thoughts on that.
Well, planning, unfortunately, requires an entrepreneur to feel that he's actually mortal, which in most cases is a problem for most entrepreneurs. So the reality is that most of them do not want to face the conversation, do not want to sit down and talk about their will, do not want to sit down and talk about a shareholders agreement, do not want to talk about a potential buyout. The reality is, unfortunately, more so than not, either a sickness or a death or something out of the entrepreneur's control will cause a situation that forces the hand, I guess. So really, when you sit down, I mean, the ability to have, even if it's a basic shareholders agreement or a basic partnership agreement amongst the people, most planning is done in such a way, especially when the kids aren't yet shareholders, so that mom or dad's ownership in the business ends up being transferred to the spouse because there's the tax-free rollover that goes. Unfortunately, what ends up happening now is, let's say, as in the case with Hans and Kevin, dad passes away. Now mom, who really probably doesn't know a lot about the business, all of a sudden finds herself with 50 or 100% of the business and doesn't really want to be involved. Also, in that context, is the inability, in many cases, to create enough cash flow for the remaining spouse or the widow to live with. So, in some cases, you'll end up seeing a shareholders agreement funded by an insurance policy. I mean, this is used in many cases, in many shareholders agreements outside the family business realm. But for our purpose today, we'll talk about it just in that. And basically, what ends up happening is the company is the owner of the insurance policy. The funds go into the company and then get passed out effectively tax-free. The goal being that the funds can go to the surviving spouse tax-free. They can live with those funds, and now the remaining of the business can find its way, having been bought out by those insurance proceeds, by the kids or someone else.
Now we're talking a little bit about planning and a little bit of forethought. You have the mother, father, they have kids, communication with the children. You know, how crucial is that to have everybody on the same page, put everybody in the same room, and explain to people their wishes? And how often do we really see that amongst entrepreneurs?
It's very difficult. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, I was sitting with a client, and his two children were there, and we started to have the conversation about what happens when dad dies. And unfortunately, I think it was an uncomfortable situation in order for the kids to be talking. And we're talking grown children here. We're not talking about 15 and 16 years old who don't want to face the fact that their parents are going to die. So, and unfortunately, what ends up happening is you kind of avoid the topic. Depending on the relationship between the parent and the kids, the age of the kids, how long the kids have been in the business, the knowledge of the kids, I mean, all of that plays into it. But I think you need to have an open discussion in terms of what's going to happen, especially if the kids are involved in the business. I mean, you don't want to leave them out to, hanging out to dry. And unfortunately, I guess lucky enough for the family, with Hans and Kevin, they were involved in the business, so dad had already done a lot of that preparing you on a day-to-day basis. In some cases, the kids have to come back from out of town in order to help keep the business going.
Kevin and Hans, I mean, you mentioned that it's really cocktail napkin discussions that took place. Do you find that was at least helpful in that regard? That there was at least some talk?
It did help us. Reason being, when it did happen, I was very I was very careful with my execution. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't have. I mean, we had the will, but let's just for a second say if that will was not there, I still knew what I needed to do. It just would have been a harder legal battle in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Now, did he talk with all 4 kids separately, together? Did he have these similar discussions?
Right. He did have discussions with us all 4 together. Just I'm sure that the other siblings had discussions with my father as well that I'm not aware of. So yeah, I think in that sense he treated us equal in terms of the conversations he had with us. Yeah.
So cocktail napkin better than nothing at all, I guess.
Well, at least I think the discussions at least are better than nothing at all.
100%. I think hats off to your father to at least have had the foresight, in order to be able to deal with the situation, because you never know what's going to happen. Most entrepreneurs, unfortunately, think they're never going to pass away.
True.
More on making that transition in family business, and as well, Mike will tell us about a John Molson School of Business Fuller Landau Family Business Award, and you never know, you could be the next winner.
Calange Lingerie, the most refined lingerie for the perfect holiday gift.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. And Josh, we were talking about the transition from family businesses, dealing with loss this evening. Now, on a more positive note, Fuller Landau has been involved with the John Molson School of Business to recognize outstanding family businesses, and perhaps we can learn more about that from yourself and Mike Newton.
Listen, Quebec economy is built, and there are SMEs and family businesses, and it's great that the John Molson School of Business is recognizing that. And I know Mike has been involved quite closely for the last couple of years or so. So maybe you can tell us a little bit what it's about and kind of what family businesses might qualify.
Well, we got this off the ground. This is the second year in motion right now. The first year, surprisingly, was a great success. The turnouts, the awards, the recipients really turned out to be very high quality. We have 3 categories. We have the small, the medium, and the large size on family business, entrepreneurial type environment. Last year, unfortunately, we didn't have anybody in the small that kind of met the criteria. So, we've been trying to make sure that the winners, when they do, are sitting in that positive territory. Basically, there's the criteria is on the website, so you can go to flmontreal.com. And on the homepage, there's a click through to all the criteria. But basically, the principle behind it is to recognize amongst their peers Montreal entrepreneurs, but not only in a business success, also through philanthropic endeavors, what they give back in terms to the community, and really what we're looking for is businesses that have at least 2 generations involved. Sometimes 3, and we've even seen, where we're teetering on the 4th generation in some cases. So really, this is what we're looking for. Obviously, it's a combination of 5 criteria, and I could talk forever, but just go to the website, flmontreal.com, and you can go right to the first page.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there that would certainly qualify. As we come to the last closing minutes of the show, Hans and Kevin, perhaps you can give us what your one piece of advice to today's entrepreneur would be.
Well, my piece of advice would be basically like my favorite movie, Rocky. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And you just got to keep taking the hits and just keep moving.
Excellent. Kevin?
And, for me, I'd be, being the position I am, I butt heads with a lot of people. Clients, suppliers, everything. So I'd just tell you to be confident in your decision making and ruthless in your execution.
And Dan, as we wrap up the calendar year 2012, not there yet, wrap up the calendar year of 2011. I'm already ahead of myself. Certainly, with all the great stories and all the great entrepreneurs around, 2 things stand out. One, a little bit of the Rocky reference as perseverance. Entrepreneurs, you persevere, you get knocked down, you get back up. But it's planned perseverance, a little bit of vision perseverance. It's a little bit of, I know what I'm doing, and it's not just a shot in the dark. So planning is also really huge, certainly as we've heard in the story tonight as well. It's been some interesting times, and from entrepreneurs, you learn a lot. And I think we certainly have over this past year.
It's been a fun year, Josh, and we have the audio archives up at flmontreal.com, as well as Mike was saying, information on your Family Business Award with the John Molson School of Business. So go to flmontreal.com for more info on that. We return on January 23rd on the Monday, so all the best to everyone here. Mike Newton from Fuller Landau, thank you very much. Kevin and Hans Thin from CI Analytics. Very interesting story and a fascinating business as well. Thank you both for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And Mr. Miller, we'll see you in
And
January.
Mr. Delmar, thank you very much. Excellent co-hosting.
As usual. It's been
I like
fun.
to think so.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, guys.
From the CJAD 800 News Broadcast Center in downtown Montreal.
Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. I'm Kelly Lepari. Here's what's making news tonight. Quebec ready to take legal action over the long gun registry, and Canada has pulled out of the world's only binding climate treaty. But first, let's check your drive from the CJD Lakekeeper Traffic Center. Here's Michel Boyer.
Thanks very much. Well, we have very little volume out there, and it's looking like a pretty much beautiful drive. No problems heading over across any of your South Shore spans. Over on the Met East, I am actually just right now picking up on the Met West, I should say, at Saint Croix. There seems to be a towing operation in the right-hand lane as you come through.